Okay? Now let's go further. So when you look at it like that, it makes the people in Capitol Hill, it makes the people on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue look like idiots, doesn't it? Well, they are idiots. But let's go further. It says, previously, it was being reported that U.S. banks are facing unrealized losses of $620 billion on the bonds that they are holding due to rapidly rising interest rates. But now we are being told that it is actually $780 billion. And there's a rule of thumb here. If the government tells you that they're only about to lose 6 or 700 billion, I would multiply by 4 or 5 times, because they're never going to give you the reality of the situation until you see it right on your back and can't get it off of you. That's what politicians do. They lie. But let's go further. It says, and when you throw in unrealized losses on their loan portfolios, the unrealized losses that our banks are facing come to a grand total of somewhere around $1.7 trillion. Now, that is staggering. Now, listen, we also look at the situation, and let me pull this up real quick. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up for you. Where is it at? Right here. All right. Student loan debt amount. Okay. Now we say in 2023, Forbes has it at 1.75 trillion. So now when we look at the bank's losses of 1.7 trillion, and then we look at student loans at 1.75 trillion, right? That is almost $3.5 trillion. That's 3.45 trillion, right? Right? If the math serves right, right? Now, that is just what is acknowledged in that small portion of the economy. Now, I want you to realize something. With sanctions on the largest manufacturer and trader and investor in the world, and specifically and especially America's largest financer, largest investor, and largest trade partner, China, the sanctions and sanctioning microchips, trying to keep the edge in microchips, does that seem rational when you're losing out on everything else? And starting a trade war with the people who supply 93% of all goods on your shelves in a time where students are suffering under a $1.75 trillion debt of student loans, and the banks are facing a $1.7 trillion total of unrealized losses. Does that make sense to pick a fight with the people who are financing infrastructure, who are trying to invest in a nation that needs investment? Common sense tells you that this does not make sense. But only in a bizarro world with bizarro politics do people think that up is down and down is up, in is out is in, and right is wrong and wrong is right. And that is here in America and in the Western world. Again, I go back to my point. Let's just address this 1.75 trillion. And all one has to do is put in these keywords: student loan debt amount. All you have to do is put in there. You don't even have to click on it. Just go to put student loan debt amount, hit enter. And the first thing comes up is Forbes, right? And Forbes says that 1.7 trillion in total student loan debt. That's what the students are suffering. Think about this. If these are your future teachers, doctors, lawyers, inventors, technicians, engineers, architects, generals, admirals, astronauts, excavators, surveyors, what sense does it make saddling future generations with unpayable debt? in this article, it says, and I'm skimming it, it says that means $28,950 is owed per borrower on average. This is unreal. If education is what civilizes a nation, and it is, and the proper education is what helps to elevate a nation and helps it progress and maintain a level of prosperity, common sense tells you not to saddle those future leaders, doctors, lawyers, and teachers, and all of this with unpayable debt, especially when we're looking at a $1.7 trillion unrealized losses in the bank loan portfolios. So now, when the banks start going belly up, and there's no funding for the trucking, and there's no funding for the shipping, and there's no funding for the air cargo, and there's no funding for the trains to ship stuff. There's no insurance companies because they can't get the loans to be insurance companies. Now we're seeing unemployment add up in all different spheres of employment. We're seeing banks shut down. And when we say one bank, you got to think about some banks have 20, 30 branches. So to say 100 banks shut down is to minimize the great magnitude of losses that the banking system may suffer. And this goes directly to unemployment. So if these people are graduating with debt on their back like that, how can they focus on building a future for themselves and their nation when all that they can think about is getting that debt monkey off of their back? But how can they get the debt off their back if we have been hit with a massive amount of unemployment in almost all fields across America, and it's only going to get worse? Common sense tells you, if you have common sense, it tells you that the policies and the policies makers make no sense. They are only making policies that are a detriment to the livelihoods of the people and the security of the state. I mean, that's what it is. Let's go a little further, okay?